Hey, this is Rama from Creations Landscape Designs. In this video, I wanted to show you briefly how a designer plans a design. But before I do that, I make videos about drought-tolerant plants, California native plants, sustainability, and anything and everything in between. So if you'd like to get more of that content in your feed, then hit the red subscribe button. All right, let's do this. So the first thing that a designer does is assess the site from the perspective of what is the client looking for, what does the client want to do with the garden, but also from the perspective of what areas get more sun, what areas get more shade. Is there any existing features that for whatever reason we would want to keep? Maybe there's existing plants that we want to keep, like existing trees. Maybe there's existing succulents that we might want to repurpose. Where are the different elements that are existing located? What does the existing irrigation look like? Does it need to be retrofitted? Do we need to start over from scratch? How old is it? Where's the front door located in relation to the views? Or maybe if you're designing a backyard, it's okay, what views do we want to highlight from the different windows or sliding glass door or whatever? And how much room do we need in terms of maybe room to entertain? Maybe the client really wants to barbecue and have a grilling area. These are all things that need to be considered before the designer can even come out to take site measurements, just so they know exactly what they are expecting and what the client is expecting from the designer. Now, the second thing that the designer does is draw a site plan. This happens to be a backyard that I drew the site plan of in Corona del Mar. I've shown where the property line is, where the AC is, where all of the doors and windows are, because there's features that I might want to highlight looking out one of the windows or one of the doors. And if you're going to hire a licensed contractor, whether that's referred by your designer, highly recommend, or whomever referred you to the contractor, or however you found the contractor, that contractor will not be able to accurately quote to install the project without a scaled, detailed site plan. So you want the site plan that the designer does to be detailed, and it means going out there with a measuring tape and taking detailed measurements of all the doors and all the windows. And if you live in an area where there is a homeowners association to tend with, you are going to need to submit a detailed site plan to the HOA and possibly the city if you're doing anything that requires city submittal. Now, the third thing that the designer will do, whether that be done on paper or digitally in this case, is concept drawings. Behind the scenes, I kind of might rough out on paper ideas that I have. I usually will use tissue paper or what's called tracing paper. And then I go into the AutoCAD software and I digitally draw what I'm thinking. In this case, I colored the drawing digitally. I like adding a bit of color because it adds a little bit of something. And the idea for this particular project in Corona del Mar was to have poured in place concrete pavers and just to kind of add areas to entertain. There's a raised garden bed area that I'm proposing with some drought tolerant plant material. This is one option. I always present two options to the client and let them decide whether they like option one, option two, or a mix of both, because you want to be able to have various options that you can choose from. This is the second option that I did for the client, which I liked, and so did they. The idea here is that the poured in place concrete in different shapes and sizes adds visual interest to the garden. And if you're thinking, why concrete? Well, when I met with the client in this case to go over what was possible for the landscape, I presented the hypothetical suggestion of poured in place concrete, and they really liked the idea, so I went with it. All the plants that I've selected here for this project, which I will show you down the road, are a mixture of California native plants, California friendly plants, plants that don't need a lot of water or maintenance, because most homeowners don't want to have to constantly maintain the garden. And the green kind of square rectangular area to the top right is meant to represent a raised garden bed where they can grow edibles, and to the left I've hidden the air conditioner with some plant material just tall enough to hide the air conditioner. What I also do, that most designers also do, is create what I call mood boards. Now, for the sake of privacy, I've removed the name of the client. However, what this is meant to represent for this particular mood board is hardscape elements that I am proposing. I did propose to potentially do pavers, but again, we went with poured in place concrete. The idea is, if you look to the bottom left image, that we have a concrete seat wall. There's meant to be a fire pit. We did go with a fire pit, but a rectangular fire pit, and just different elements that I was considering. And then to the right is kind of a hardscape color palette that I was thinking of based on the different elements and whatnot. And this is just meant to be a rough idea of what's in my head that I can present to the client through imagery, because sometimes I'm a visual person and sometimes clients need to actually look at images to be able to see what it is they're potentially getting. Now, this happens to be a planting mood board. And the idea here is to show different plant material that I was proposing. And in this case, I had some lavender, some Calilophus hartwigii, sundrops, red yucca, ceanothus, agave, a raised garden bed, some diamondia as an option in between the poured in place concrete, which we ended up not doing that. And then the one plant that I didn't suggest here that we did end up adding was a low growing kind of dwarf agapanthus, because on the property in the back they had a slope that was HOA maintained and property of the HOA that was just covered with agapanthus. So we ended up kind of deciding mutually that it would be kind of cool to bring that in, but in a dwarf version, so it's not so jarring to the eye. But again, this gives the client ideas of what they can have with plant material. Now, once all that is done, I've met with the client, we've gone over everything, we've decided on one option or a mix of different options. Then I create the detailed drawings that can be not only bid on by a licensed landscape contractor, but also submitted to the HOA if you have one. This particular drawing is the hardscape plan. And again, the idea here is that the contractor knows the dimensions of each of the poured in place concrete areas and what it is, so they know how they're installing it, how many square feet is it, where is it exactly located from point A to point B. This way, when they are installing it, they can actually properly install it. And the measurements have to be accurate, because you can't just haphazardly go off of a plan, and it's easier if the contractor doesn't have to take a measuring tape to the plan. This is the planting plan I created. Again, it shows the trees, the ground covers, shrubs, etc. that we are proposing. What's the scientific name? How many are there? What's the quantity? What's the gallon size? It's meant to be super detailed. We added lights to this project. How many path lights? How many up lights? Where are each of the specific plants located? Because let's say, for example, you decide you want to do a drip system. The contractor is going to need to know where are each of the plants located so that they know where to put all the drip emitters, 1 or 2 per plant, depending on the type of plant you're using in the garden. And this is all the things that a designer considers and does when working on a project. Now, I will go through each of these in a separate video in greater detail, but this is the general gist of it.